Hello and welcome to another edition of Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell
and Joanna Wells.
In today's episode, we are surfing the web. We are joining the information superhighway, and we're looking at, I suppose, the very common method that pricing is shown on many software as a service, SaaS style businesses. The classic, I think we're all used to seeing them by now, 3 options. When it's on a month-to-month, you're shown very often a cheap option which doesn't have all the bells and whistles, something like a beginner or an intro or something like that. Then you often have the one in the middle that very often seems to be highlighted and pointed at, that tends to be most of the benefits, seems to cater to the vast majority of people. And then you tend to have a third option, a bigger option with even more benefits that maybe doesn't suit to everyone, and that can be the enterprise value. So I think we'll just talk around this today.
Yeah, in terms of pricing, you may be aware that this concept is often referred to in terms of good, better, best pricing or tiered pricing. It can even be explained in technical terms as differentiated pricing. So you can differentiate pricing based on product attributes, features of the products. Some people look at the features and benefits of the products to differentiate into a good, better, best system. Other companies alternatively look a little bit further and they think, okay, how do our customers view these products? How do they use these products? And looking at an example there would be like a mobile phone company and looking at good, better, best in terms of data usage, how much data a customer would use, and then would cut off and cut off those pricing tiers based on data usage. Obviously, if we look at the evolution of mobile phone tiered pricing, we can see now they've got a little bit more sophisticated with their tiering. One reason for that was because customers didn't really like the fact that, they were tiering the pricing, capping pricing, and limiting their data. So they actually increased and made most of their data unlimited and used other features and benefits to entice customers to buy different phone options. So obviously here now I've even touched upon that word entice. What is tiering all about? Well, underlying all of that is a deep-rooted sort of psychological pull using pricing to draw people's attention to different options.
Yeah, I think there's 2 topics there Joanna's discussed, and I think they're both very relevant. The first one, clearly segmentation. Segmenting, you're not using a sales team, you're not using, customer service team, well, maybe who take phone calls, but you're selling predominantly through a website, online, low human interaction in many instances. And so the classic knowing your customer, really understanding their value drivers, that aspect is harder to do. And so the segmentation strategy is there, the tiering is segmenting that market so that you can charge different amounts for fundamentally the same thing with slight nuances, obviously, but you're trying to tier it by stripping away certain aspects to cater to certain customers. Clearly with that, and I think we'll get into this a bit later, that means you really need to know what the value drivers are, and that involves, understanding why your customers use your product, understanding who they are, trying to categorize them in a way that is optimal, because you can't have infinite numbers of variations on this online format. It has to be reasonably simple, and that I suppose is the classic 3. That's the positive, that's that aspect. The other thing Joanna touched on there obviously is the other stuff, the psychological aspect of stuff. I think we covered this in previous episodes, stuff like Cialdini, I think his name is, who did stuff like influence, and they're pushing you towards the central. It's almost like menu pricing often. They're often pushing you towards the central one. They potentially could be pushing you to request more services than you maybe need. I think the example there Joanna gave of the telephone thing, I think we've read in the past or discussed in the past that people often choose phone plans that give them way more data than they'll ever use and pay more. So there's a psychological aspect where sometimes you could be pushed into a category that maybe you don't need, and once you get used to that, you may not downgrade to a lower quality plan. But it's there's those two aspects. There's the first one, which is a rational segmentation strategy, and then the second is also psychological, how the human brain works, and you tend to go for the one in the middle often. You think maybe the lower quality, the cheaper one maybe isn't suitable for you, and maybe even do people even buy the higher price one? I don't really know. Or is it just purely there to make the middle one more enticing? Those are questions also that from a psychological perspective that are interesting.
Yeah, the distance between the pricing between those price tiers is called something called price relativity analysis, and really it looks at what the optimal price is at each of those tiers. But you can look at moving aside from that though, if you think about price relativity on its own in isolation of how customers buy, then it doesn't matter how much analytics you do, you'll never really find the optimum price, because you've got to base that price on customer usage. It can be, now you can look at past sales data. How did the customers use that data? Now we've got much more data at our disposal than ever before, but it takes some time to comb through that. You can look at past sales history. What options do they buy more of? But the question is, it doesn't answer the question of why did they buy it. So that requires more customer-based research, more external research than your internal benchmarks of customer usage. So I think often when I see pricing teams, they work on tiered pricing, they're overly concerned with the what, because it's something that they can control. It's easy. It's data that's at their disposal. They can just go, okay, and often they make assumptions based on that. Now that's okay if you do it in a formalized way and you use hypothesis testing to then test those assumptions. But often I would say that those hypotheses aren't followed through and tracked and monitored well. So what the upshot is really, the business ends up with price points that are sort of out of sync with the market. And often they go back to default cost plus to get a margin target, because, understanding the nuances and changes in customer preferences can be difficult if you haven't got your price architecture and customer research set up correctly to inform your price architecture. In terms of the psychological aspects of, tiered pricing, they work very well now, but it does depend on what I've just said. You've got to have that research documented, and you've got to track, because people change. We all change. Now, looking at the mobile phone example, that was an interesting one, because they used to actually limit your customer data and put limitations on that to build the price options. And in so doing, created some kind of risk aversion to, because people would run out of data, and people would then sort of fear running out of data, and sort of each month go, gosh, where am I at with my data? And there would be a backlash against that, as I've already mentioned. So then as Aidan mentioned there, what they did, they just go, well, obviously data usage is something that's of a big concern. It's highly valued by our customers, but we're ending up, negatively impacting our customers, and they're switching because of it. So why don't we just give them infinite amount of data? Because to a customer, nobody really knows how much a gigabyte really is in terms of real-time usage. So we're sort of as Aidan said, it's nudging us to buy more because of what we experienced before with the phone plan. So that's an ironic sort of use of, they're actually benefiting from past failures in their mobile phone plan usage and tiered pricing strategy. They've learnt, the mobile phone company has learnt from it, and have now, enticing people to get more data that they don't need at probably higher price points. And the customer doesn't mind because they don't really understand the data, the amount of data that they're using, and they just feel, oh, well, at least I'm not going to run out, which is the biggest risk driver to them. So this is, I suppose, an example of how you can build psychological drivers like risk, usage, into your tiered pricing to really optimize your revenue.
Yeah, I suppose when we started this conversation, I thought this was a reasonably simple topic, but clearly there's a huge amount to it. I think, again, it's the old classic of strategy versus tactics, obviously. Without an actual pricing strategy, what is your product or service, whether it's online, whether it's SaaS, whether it's a classic traditional business, you need to understand those value drivers, that's your strategy, really. The tactics, clearly, with data, as Joanna mentioned, the huge amount of data, it's sometimes it's the old wood for the trees thing. People can be blinded by the amount of data that there is, but without a strategy, that makes sense logically, that can be explained to a human, no aspect of data is really going to change that. With data, you can run A/B tests on these pages now, even very simple methods like Google Analytics will help any website do that. There's obviously a lot of companies now in the space, people like Price Intelligently, and a huge number of new entrants are coming in, Silicon Valley, focused, based on optimizing pricing. And, with websites, you can run A/B testing, you can run infinite numbers given a certain volume of traffic. SEMrush will help with that, as will other websites. And you can optimize colors, click-through rates, everything, to optimize that pricing. Is it $49.99 on your middle option on a month by month versus $60, whatever that optimal price range is. And you can optimize those things around the edges. But I suppose fundamentally you need to set it up in a sensible manner with the you need to set that up with an actual proper pricing strategy. I often wonder about the enterprise versions that are on these things, the third option, the highest option. I wonder how many people even choose the enterprise option. Like if you're IBM or if you're a major corporation, do you really just book online? I'd highly doubt it. I'd imagine you'd be going in and getting specific services and pricing. So I often wonder, even showing that online to some extent, I think is just a psychological approach to drag you up. The low one in many cases, saying this, like I even use the example of SEMrush. We use that at Taylor Wells for website optimization. Originally, I think we went with a middle option, which was what, the classic you're almost defaulted into. Later, I realized we didn't need that and downgraded to the cheaper option. So in many cases, there are, there's a rules are there to be broken to some extent. But I think it's the old classic. Work out the pricing strategy first, and that's your strategy, and then it's down to implementation and tactics. And I suppose I would put this SaaS stuff on implementation and tactics. And there's a huge overlap there's always an overlap between pricing and marketing. And I think definitely when we get into this area of online showing things, you're getting into, certainly with websites, you're very much into the marketing pricing overlap. And that's when really your pricing department should be integrated with your marketing team, with your website team, and it shouldn't be sitting siloed, because clearly in this instance, we know here the color schemes, the highlighting of words, the word usage, all those things factor into how people convert. And it's not just pricing. It is just pricing. Pricing is fundamentally the commercial approach of your company. So it's not just the numbers, is what I'm trying to say. It's the overall, it's the overall menu, really. It's the overall approach.
Yeah, and interestingly, for uninformed customers that don't know about the product, using that SEMrush example, when you're sort of new to a particular product, especially a technology product, people kind of know that they need it, but they don't know why or how they're going to use it. So what do? They go, well, I know I need it. That's not an option. This one supposedly is good. So how they came about knowing about SEMrush is important factor. So that's a marketing pull driver. And then the ultimate decision, it's still ambiguous. So what do people do? Well, you've got three options, good, better, best. Well, is the cheapest one going to be right for me? I'll hedge my bets. I'll go for the middle. And that's why people often go for the middle and then upgrade as they become more informed about the product and about more informed about their needs, really. Because as a customer, you go, actually, the middle option for SEMrush is just not enough. I need more capability. I need to look at more search terms. I need more analytics. I need to know what the competition is. I need to know what the saturation is in the market. I need to then decide on what the selection of secondary keywords are. Those are all things that you learn over time. But with that learning and using the actual tool, then you're educating yourself, and then the company gets their premiums over time. And before you know it, then you're using the best version. And then as your business builds, then you go into the enterprise version. Now, this is actually quite interesting about enterprise version. So they put it as an option online, good, better, best being the better one. But then they go often through a very old-fashioned, fixed pricing negotiation discussion with clients at the enterprise level. And then we go all the way back to what we've discussed before, how they set prices, usually cost plus. So on the facade, it's all, using decoy pricing and tiered pricing, but eventually, the end product is often the same, fixed pricing based on cost plus. So there's still a lot of work for technology companies there, using SaaS and tiered pricing models. But anyway, look, we can go on this. As Aidan said, it is actually quite a complex topic, but hopefully we've touched on a lot of the key issues, and I hope you enjoyed listening to us today. Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much, and have a great weekend. Bye.